So take breaks as you need to, but I think we're just going to truck along as much as we can. The biggest and most important piece for me today is to talk about school strategies and interventions. I want you to leave with some ideas of things that you can do to help students who are struggling with mental illness and mental disorders. So I'd really like that to be a highlight. Hi.
I just took a bite of banana, but I'm a mother of a child that went through the school system with mental illness. She had depression, she had anxiety, she had ADHD, so she was kind of multiples. And it was really a struggle. And I think there's some things I can just tell teachers that came from my daughter that could really help you.
Sure.
Because
So you'll provide a good perspective. Great, thank you. If we have time, we're going to talk about some mental illness in the news and some celebrities who struggle with mental illness. And then at the end, I doubt we'll have time, but we might touch on self-harm. If you guys specifically want information about that, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to send you my PowerPoint, because I don't know if we're going to get to that. So let's start out by, on that little worksheet, did you guys receive a worksheet up there now? Everyone's good? Everyone has a worksheet? Okay. This is for your reference only. It's a place for you to take notes and a place for you to just kind of share your thoughts so that we can reference back to them later. But on your worksheet, discuss with someone nearby what is mental illness, or mental health, sorry. What is mental health? You don't necessarily have to specifically answer what it's the possession of and what it allows us to do. Just overall, what is mental health? Go ahead and write down your thoughts, and then we'll have you share a few things. Take about 2 minutes to do that. Okay, go ahead and discuss with someone nearby you what is mental health.
That one is right now.
Okay.
I'm going to run upstairs with this camera, I hope, and see if there's. Steve had some other cards up there.
A card?
Another.
Okay, come back. All right, folks, I'd like to hear what you came up with.
I said it was a blessing if you are mentally healthy.
Good one. Did not come up with that. It is a blessing, she said, if you are mentally healthy. What else?
We went really broad over here, and I just said being able to be mentally sound enough to be able to take care of yourself and your responsibilities on a day-to-day basis.
Good.
and interact with others.
The ability to just interact. What else? Yes.
Feelings such as happiness, sadness, anxiety, self-worth,
guilt, and energy are all components that can make up mental health.
Mhm. And perhaps how you deal with those feelings. Good. Anything else?
Dealing with self-esteem and perspective on yourself and confidence, not only on yourself but others.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Recognizing who we are as persons and understanding that we really 5 part human beings. We got mental, memory, emotional bodies, which are basically sheets of energy. We see the physical body, and those are the 3 intertwined with physical body. And there's a fifth one, the body of first cause, which is where everything that belongs to you, and you alone, begins. It's called the causal body. Now, psychologists do not look at root cause of these imbalances between and amongst the bodies. And I'll say this to you, that it all has to do with the way we as individuals and young people process energy that we receive every day. So whenever there is an imbalance, it manifests, and that's what we see. And we tend to look for accommodations to correct that, but not really attempting to address where and why the energy is causing the imbalance.
Right, and I think balance is the key word, Mr. Lucas, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it, is just balance, having balance in our life. So it is a possession of skills necessary to cope with life's challenges in a nutshell. We all have mental health in some way. Even those who have mental illness have mental health in some capacity. Here is the DSM-4 definition of mental disorder, to the contrary of mental health. Mental illness. It's a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. Daily functioning is a key piece here. And this is why we are here. This is what we're going to talk about today. And this is according to the National Association of Mental Illness. So I'm kind of a person who's big on Maslow's hierarchy. And I think really we could relate to anything to this. And I was as I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today and what this would look like, I thought, well, this might be a good starting piece that really, as long as we can get students to school, and if they are physically here and physically functioning, we can have an impact on the rest in some way. But if we have a student who's dealing with a mental disorder, they can get stuck here. And it's our job to identify them and, more importantly, find ways to support them. Mental illness can have both biological and environmental factors. Risk factors could involve life situations. We don't really necessarily know, though, what causes mental illness. And really, I don't think there is a specific thing that we can say, yep, that causes mental illness, because it's so different for everybody and it's so broad. There simply is no diagnosis. This is a graphic that I realize it might be difficult to see some of these things, but when I found it, I was thinking, if a student has the flu or severe, maybe someone is dealing with cancer, we stop and we deal with it and we treat it. Mental illness isn't always necessarily like that. When people are dealing with mental illness, sometimes it's easy to tell them, keep on keeping on, just deal with it and let's move on. Let's have a normal day, blah blah blah. Well, these little quotes here kind of are some of the perceptions that people might have. So top left graphic, the left brain is a brain that does not suffer from ADHD. The right brain is a brain with ADHD. So you can see the actual physical difference between a healthy brain and one that is struggling with ADHD. Someone might say to that, to someone with ADHD, it's just a made-up illness that's used to sell kids or sell drugs to my kids. This one up here, depressed. The one on the left is a depressed brain versus a non-depressed brain. Someone might say to a person with depression, oh, just get over yourself. A lot of people have it worse than you. Move on. Over there we've got OCD. The one on the left is a normal control brain. The one on the right is an obsessive compulsive brain. Someone might say, you're just picky and annoying. Grow up. And then over here we've got PTSD. This is a normal brain. And this is a brain functioning with PTSD. Someone might say, oh, what happened to you isn't that bad. Quit whining, quit moping, get over it. Some facts about mental illness, and I'm not going to read all of these, but one that really stood out to me is that 20% of kids have a diagnosable disorder. And I'm no mathematician, but I thought, that calculates out to like 6 kids in each of our classes in each of the hours. That's huge. The bottom there, it says a lot of them might go undiagnosed. Why do you think that is?
Just think it's a behavior problem.
Yeah, someone might think, oh, it's just the way they're acting.
Or they're having a bad day that day.
Having a bad day. Yeah.
It's hard to diagnose it and to understand the signs and symptoms, and we're teachers and we might have a little training on that, but and it's a process where you need lots of other people to help you
Yep, there's
diagnose
lots of
that.
hands in it.
I think some people fear over-medicating their child, because I have a student that is very hyperactive, and he would really do well with medication, but his parents are like, yeah, he's been tested, yeah, he has this, but we choose not to medicate.
Interesting.
There's
And not uncommon either. Nicole?
Our society sees it as a negative thing.
It's a stigma.
It's a stigma. No one wants that stigma, so they're not going to bring their child, or their children aren't going to get help because they don't want to have that stigma.
Yeah. I heard someone else.
It's a stigma.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, the parent that almost drove her kids into the ocean off Little Beach. Apparently the family was not allowed to be a part of the decision making to determine whether she was indeed ready to go home and so on, to be handed back her responsibilities. It can happen.
Yeah.
I was thinking that some kids, they introvert themselves, and so you're like, oh, that's that quiet, well-behaved kid, they're doing great, and so they slip through because they aren't causing a problem for you, so you don't notice it.
We're going to talk about just that in a little bit. Yeah.
I had a student who came to me because she wanted help, but we couldn't convince her parents that she needed help. Oh, you do this all the time, and finally, when she was old enough, she went and got her own. She was close to 18. It's like, well, we're just I'm here for you. When you're 18, we're gonna get you, and that's what we had to wait for because her parents would not take her.
Maybe some denial happening.
Yeah.
Glenn?
It's an educational issue and a societal educational issue. There are a lot of parents who are not informed. And they have that idea, well, then I'll beat it out of them, or I'll give them this consequence, and they'll use leverage in different ways to try and make things happen. And unless the parents are informed and part of the process, it's difficult, and we don't have a lot of power as teachers to get them through that hoop.
Yeah. Jim?
I was fortunate this year to have a parent that emailed me and communicated their child's mental health needs, and it really helped to create a good partnership. And if I hadn't had that, I would have really not known what to do. So I'm glad to see that starting to happen, is what I wanted to say.
That's huge, and we're going to talk about that too. It's good.
I also have an athlete in that same situation, because all of a sudden things just started getting different and gone a lot and all that kind of stuff, and that parent informed me that this is what's going on, this is why, these things are happening in practice and in games and stuff, so that helped me understand her more and have, like you said, a better connection and understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah, the change. That's one thing that we watch for. Change in behavior, change in mood, change in, yeah, all that. A couple other things that I thought of too are, aside from the stigma, accessibility. Here in St. Francis, we have, I think there's one mental health clinic, but then we've got Volunteers of America down the road. It's not a lot. It's not a lot of support, considering 6 kids in each of our class periods might have one of these illnesses. So accessibility, and that's something that we are working on. In fact, this year we brought on into our school Alexander House. Comes in to meet with students every Monday to deal with domestic violence or domestic abuse that might be happening in their home or that has happened in their home. And then starting next week, we're so thrilled to be having a chemical dependency counselor and a mental health counselor coming into our school twice a week. So this is huge, and we're moving forward with that here, at least at St. Francis High School. And the accessibility piece is a big thing. Glenn?
And just one more thing, and I'll be really honest, I'm dealing with it right now. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna get emotional. My youngest daughter is going through this, and I'm a parent, but I'm a teacher, and I know every single person in the school who I need to talk to. And it's taken months and months and months and months and months. And so the accessibility, but just the hoops that we have to jump through. And I know everyone, and I can't even imagine what it is for those parents who don't have access or knowledge or understanding or connections. So I'm sorry, but I'm living it right now.
And you can get through to the other side, so hang in there. There were days when I just thought, I don't want to live anymore, I can't do this. I can't be up in the middle of the night at the hospital if she's cutting her arm. It's like, so.
The other piece that I think that we haven't covered is costs. Some of our families just simply can't afford to take their kids to the doctor. So that's another big piece. Oh, did I fast forward here or what? No. Let's see. All right. This is a graphic that I thought was pretty cool. I pinned it. But the startling statistic that I found on here that I want to touch on is more than 50% of students with a mental disorder age 14 and older drop out of high school. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I thought even if that's a little bit true, it just reinforces the fact that it's really our job to help identify these students, more importantly support these students, and to help catch them. There's no child left behind with us, right? And we are the world's best workforce, so. All right, so we're going to start by talking about anxiety disorders. And as we go through these, obviously they are not limited to children, and you may know some adults who are dealing with these things as well. So what I would like you to do is just talk with someone near you and cover what have you seen in the classroom as far as anxiety? What are some symptoms of child anxiety? And what strategies have you used? The strategies piece is the one that I think we need to focus most of our energy on. What have you done? What have you seen? What are you going to do or try to help out those kiddos who are suffering from anxiety? So let's take about 3 or 4 minutes. We've got a lot of stuff that we want to get through, so I wish we had more time to talk collaboratively. But take 3 or 4 minutes, talk with the people near you, and then we'll come back and share.
And then they'll start doing it.
All right, so just a couple of facts about anxiety. Studies suggest that children or adolescents are more likely to have an anxiety disorder if their parents have anxiety disorders. So that makes us pause to think about, is it biological? Is it environmental? Is it both? But I'd like to hear from you. What did you come up with? What does anxiety look like in your classroom? And more importantly, how do you deal with it?
Well, I have a little first grader who has practiced the sight words and sounds in reading for now, what has it been, like 5 months or so, and she really doesn't have recall of the basic ones even. So you can see she's looking to see, oh, is she gonna call on me? She starts breathing heavily and moving around in the chair and picking at her. So it was obvious to me that she was really anxious. And I talked to the teacher about this, and she said, no, she just doesn't want to do it. And I said, I have to tell you because I'm in this close situation that she's very anxious and she wants to do it well. So I think sometimes other people can help a teacher know that she saw some other behaviors. So.
Yeah, just another set of eyes can help to identify something. That's good. What else?
One thing we talked about is that in many ways school creates anxiety by putting kids in situations that aren't normal or aren't to them or for, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yep.
I taught elementary art for a year, and I had classes that were 25 minutes back to back, and I had 6 before lunch, so it was just straight. And so I had a lot of anxiety looking at the clocks, seeing if parent or the teachers came late to pick them up. I had another classroom in there again, or if they came early, it wasn't done. And so my anxiety would go up. Instead of blowing up at the kids, I developed a system that was happy moose. And so the kids would go, and they'd zip their lips, and that gave me just enough time to like kind of bring my anxiety down, seeing all these kids doing this. And then just redirect them and just be calmer about it instead of just having my anxiety up here and ready to blow.
That's good. Write that down, people. Here's a strategy. Happy moose.
Did you say, did you tell them that they could just feel it from you that you were gonna blow?
No, I mean, I can stay calm, but like, I'd just be like, things were kind of out of order or whatever, I'd just be happy moose. Confused moose, you just play a little Simon Says with them and get them back.
So you started?
I started.
Okay, so you started, okay.
So I can feel my anxiety, and so then I do that, and then they all play along.
That's good. I like that. I like that. Someone in my last group too said just having a do-over. So if you feel like kids are walking into the classroom kind of collectively, it just feels off. Just have a do-over. 2 minutes in, if you're feeling this, have them exit and then just walk in. All right, we're just gonna start over. Let's try this again. Anything else?
I know for like a strategy, some people have done like an activity or get up and move. Like, I'm a FIDE teacher, so I believe heavily that kids can only sit for, especially elementary kids, can only sit for so long and they'll get anxious and whatever. So if you just start seeing them moving a little bit, say, all right, let's get up and go shake hands with 5 people, and then go read. So you're just disengaging what they're doing and re-engage later.
Kind of another reset. Did you have something?
Yeah, one of the students I had severe anxiety, and I actually couldn't tell when he was in class at all, because he acted completely like anybody else would, and had good connections. But he wouldn't come to school a lot of times, or his parents would drive him, and he would sit in the car for 2.5 hours, they couldn't get him to come in. And so I think part of it too, like he was missing all this work, and it was high school, and one of the things that I thought we could do is modify his workload so it's not so overwhelming to come back, and like work with him in different ways to get what he missed, because it's just, I think, adding to the anxiety, knowing I didn't go again these last 2 days and there's more work to do.
Yeah, it just snowballs. Yep, absolutely. Of course, there is a normal level of anxiety, healthy anxiety, for athletes who are nervous before a game and have a hard time even functioning throughout the school day, knowing that section finals is tonight. Just that's a healthy anxiety. It means they care. So just reminding them that I understand that you're not feeling you're up to par today, sometimes that's okay, because sometimes kids have a hard time not understanding that sometimes anxiety is truly safe and healthy and good. All right, so when does it become a problem? When it adversely affects one or more areas in a child's life. Our work, our relationships, our eating, our sleeping, that kind of thing, very similar to children. So here's a scenario. Let's say we get to school in the morning and we get a call from our supervisor and it says, all right, I have a sub on the way down to your classroom. Please get up to my office right away. I need to talk to you about something. What happens? What happens? Anxiety. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's happening to you?
Stomachs in knots.
Stomach and knots. What else?
You might not be able to concentrate because you're wondering what could it be.
The brain is racing. What else? Heart is pounding.
Rapid breathing.
Rapid breathing.
Isn't it just,
Children suffering.
isn't it just basically that adrenaline fight or flight response?
Fight or
that's
flight.
Maybe not at a time where you should be having it. I mean, sometimes you should have it, but that's how I think of anxiety.
Fight or flight. Yeah, it's a good thing.
I start sweating through both undershirts.
Stop and get sweaty. So we have all these stats like, oh my God, what is happening? What's he going to say? What did I do? Did I do something wrong? Am I going to lose my job? I'm feeling anxious, I'm breathing, I'm shaking, I'm sweating. And then even the actions. You know, some of us are going to be like clicking our heels as fast as we can to get up there because we want answers. We want to know what's going on. And then other people might be like, okay, process, like think, was there a phone call? Did I have a bad interaction with a parent? Did I do something to a kid? You know, so all of that goes into possibly even compounding our anxious behavior. Same with kids. Same with kids. You know, if we ask them to do something that's unnatural or that is unexpected, you know, they might sweat through their sweater, you know, they're shaking, they're wondering what's going to happen next. What did I do wrong? Why am I sent to behavior intervention? All that stuff. So, what did I do? That's what you're thinking in our scenario. What did I do? Did I do something? Did a parent call? So the thoughts are centered around some type of danger or threat. Most importantly, am I going to lose my job? So there's lots of different physical complaints that can happen, as we covered. Behavioral responses. Me, I get annoyed. 2 weeks ago, when we were supposed to do this presentation, you know, I was sitting at home at night trying to finish my presentation, and oh my gosh, it was like every time my husband would ask me a question, I'd like rip his head off, you know. That was my response at that moment. Like, okay, I gotta get this done. So we all respond differently. Types of anxiety in children, and there are some different types. We're only going to cover the ones in bold, just simply because of time. So first one is generalized anxiety disorder, and this is the one that we primarily see in our high achievers. So children who worry excessively about grades, family, sports. Older kids might worry about you know, social situations and community issues and that sort of thing. These kiddos tend to be really hard on themselves, beat themselves up a little bit, strive for perfection. They're the ones who cry if they don't get an A. So the generalized anxiety. Obsessive compulsive. So this one is students have an obsession and they basically create the compulsion to deal with the obsession. So the obsession is the unwanted thought, the intrusive thought, and then the compulsion is the action or the way that they deal with it. Most of these, like it says, are diagnosed around age 10, but we may start seeing these these types of things in toddlers. What have you seen in classes, in your class, for students who have OCD?
I had a kid that picked up paper clips on my floor every day and brought them to me. And it was just, there we go.
I have a neighbor's kid that he's a germaphobic, so it affected him both in class and in sports. And so like when he was playing basketball, as soon as he was called out, there'd be hand sanitizer there for him to clean his hands before he could go back in. And like physically, his hands were just red and raw, and just having to deal with that, and it took a while for the parents to realize that this is a mental health thing and needs to be addressed, not it can't just be cured. You know?
Yep. I would say the germophobic type of deal, the people who are obsessed with cleanliness and germs and washing, that's probably the most common type of OCD. What else have you seen?
Answers have to be perfect.
Answers have to be perfect?
So sometimes they won't put anything down because they're not sure it's not perfect.
I've had student with health concerns. They always think there's something wrong with them. Whether they have, like a bump on their shoulder or whatever, they might think it's cancer, they might think they think the most extreme situation that they ever think could be wrong with them. But it could just be a simple bump on the shoulder, somebody bumped in them, or whatever. But it just goes to the extreme. There's no balance. There's no in between.
Yeah, I would agree. I once had a student who was a senior, great student, awesome kid. I loved working with him. It wasn't until the end of his senior year that I knew he had OCD because he had learned so many strategies to deal effectively with it. This was a student who was going to a very prestigious university, and so I'd actually worked with him fairly often doing letters of recommendation and that kind of thing. But one day he was in my office and just mentioned it, and I was like, really? And some of his obsessions, or his compulsions, were chairs. So he couldn't sit down on a chair from the right side. He always had to enter from the left, and he always had to touch it first. So regardless of what type of chair he's sitting in, it was always touch, sit from the left. Okay, now let's think about that for a minute. Do you have desks in your room that you can only enter from the other side?
Yeah.
Or tables that, maybe it's pretty cushy. The last room I was in was pretty tight, so, coming in from that side. What about the chair you're sitting in right now? So that was one of his deals. Another one was he had memorized every stairway in our entire building because he had to make sure that he would always land with his right foot. So he had to count 1, 2, 3. So as he was going, as he was going up the steps, he would always just have to make sure that he lands on the top step with the right. His other one was he wasn't dealing with the germ thing at all, but for whatever reason, light switches were a deal for him. He couldn't flip a light switch. It was always the back of the hand or the elbow. So just kind of interesting, different things that you can see with this type of deal.
So like what would happen if he landed on his left foot? Would he have to go back down and do it again?
He would do it over. Yeah. All right. Post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the biggest pieces for a diagnosis of PTSD is that the symptoms have to be present for at least a month. Typically, this wouldn't be diagnosed if the symptoms aren't lasting much longer than a month. But they've been exposed to some type of a traumatic event. You guys, the criterion for PTSD is so extensive. We're not going to go through all of this, but just to try to illustrate a couple things. The first criteria is a stressor. So one example of this was I had a student who couldn't sit in class when they were talking about domestic violence because this was a student who had witnessed tons of it in his past. So he was comfortable enough to ask for a pass and come up to the counseling office whenever that topic was talked about. So as an educator, just being aware of that, and when you might be touching on a topic that might be an issue for a student, you may not know the history, you may not know why they're asking for a pass, but just be acceptable or accept the fact that they may need to step out just for a little bit. Intrusive recollection. Traumatic event is persistently re-experienced. About 5 years ago, I had a student who, I received a call from a teacher who said that they had a student in their class who was just sitting there, head forward, just sitting, but his eyes were just going, I mean, just constantly back and forth for a long period of time. So I grabbed the nurse and we ran down, and he had come out or whatever, but we thought he was probably having a seizure. So we brought him up and he appeared fine. We called parents. Parents weren't interested in taking him to the doctor. A couple days later, same thing, different class. Teacher calls the nurse, hey, this kid is just sitting here. And we went down there and it was still happening. We thought seizure. So we called parents. Parents took him in. As it turned out, the student was experiencing severe PTSD symptoms. And what it was for whatever reason, the student was having flashbacks of seeing his biological father hold a gun to someone else's head. Okay, this is something that we were dealing with that we didn't know this kid had been dealing with this. So that's what kind of sparked our working relationship together, and by that time the student graduated, we had a fantastic working relationship. He was working with someone outside of school, we were supporting that inside of school, and it ended up being a fantastic deal. I mean, it's still sad, but we worked through. Another criteria is avoidance of stimuli. Hyperarousal is another one. Like I said, there's lots of pieces to the PTSD. Okay, I want to talk about separation anxiety disorder. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question about this, Jill. Do you have anything to say about touch with students when they have that? My father had PTSD. It wasn't what was, it was called shell shock back in the day, but you couldn't touch him from behind. He would have such a startled reaction, and that I've experienced that with some. And I'm not saying that the students, we're not diagnosing, but I think something, touch is something to be so aware of.
Right,
sometimes students really have an extreme reaction to being bumped or.
Yeah, or startled, just noise, like you said. But I think it's so different for so many people. There's not one straight up strategy that's going to work. But just being aware of things like that, and if you're aware or you notice that the student is engaging a little bit differently or is acting or performing a little bit unlike the characteristics of a peer, and try to talk to the student about it and see, is there anything that I can do in class to help you be more comfortable, or talk with the counselor or the nurse or the case manager and find out if there's anything that you should avoid. Placement in the classroom. Some of these kids may need to be seated near a door so that they can make a quick exit in situations that they're starting to feel overwhelmed. That's a good point though. I mean, just to always be thinking about, is there something that I am doing that is causing this student to have a heightened level of anxiety in class? Separation anxiety disorder. This might be a little bit more common for those of you who are working with early childhood or elementary kids. These kids commonly worry about bad things happening to their parents while they're gone, or thinking that something terrible is going to occur when they're apart. Older kids might deal with this with, again, social events, community issues, traumatic events that are happening in our community or our country. But we also see this from parents, don't we? Early ed people, dropping your kiddo off for the first day at preschool or kindergarten. The other one that I thought of as I was kind of reflecting on this is, any of us with children, guarantee you covered your kids in kisses the day of the Sandy Hook shooting, you know, and then next day, probably not so easy to drop them off at school or daycare or whatever. So, separation anxiety. What strategies can you come up with that might help kiddos to deal with this?
Get them interested in something.
Get them hooked. Yeah, find something that they like.
Sometimes having a picture to carry with them helps them connect and feel secure.
Yeah, she said have them carry a picture. That's good. What else?
Well, use baby steps and take it slow, and it's a transition. A lot of us need transitions, changing, especially if it's a big change like, well, I go to school all day now.
Yep, just allow them the time. Give them that gift. What else?
Sometimes journaling or making a card or having a way to communicate when you're apart that's prepared for when you're together.
Yep.
And recalling that experience shows that we'll see each other again. You know, remembering that yesterday I did go home at the end of the day and my mom and dad were here.
Yeah. Allowing a student to just quick call home during the day, smaller children probably. Just allow them to call home and just have a quick check-in or love you, Dad, and that's it. They can move on. But even in older kids, we can see this kind of thing. I have a student whose mother, about 3 weeks ago, his mother had a stroke. This kid had a really hard time coming back to school knowing that his mom was at home recovering by herself. So he was a frequent flyer for me for quite a while, and he would have to just come into my office, quick place to call home, and check in with Mom. Hey, how you doing? I love you. Have a good day. See you in a little bit. And then, you know, after probably 4 days of that, we tried to tame it down to only come in every other hour, and then, you know, we'll go from there. And, you know, it just takes time. And like I said, giving that gift of them to be able to deal with that, and, you know, consider the fact that it might be uncharacteristic for a youth to have to call home during the day and check in, especially a high school kid. But, you know, he dealt with it, and now he's been able to move on.
I think that taking that time is really important, and I feel like the alternative to that is having a child suppress that desire to call or a need to write a quick note or whatever. It's probably going to do more harm than good in the long run. So just allowing them to, I taught kindergarten, and I feel like it is. When are you going to find that quick little window where you can get on the phone and actually have your kid call? But finding that window, I think, is definitely worth any extra hassle that it could be.
Yeah, because they're getting their voice heard, they have an understanding ear, and that's important.
Yep. Exactly.
Can I say something
Oh, please.
about that?
Yeah.
I've taught for many years in alternative education, and you also need to let the other kids know, not let them know what's going on, but if you're, I had a student in my class that came in every morning and he would sleep. And it's like, I'm not avoiding that, and I tell the kids, I'm not always avoiding that behavior. I think it may seem like it in class, but I address it with them outside of class, and I found out that this kid was up all night because Mom's boyfriend beat up Mom during the night, and he was worried about that. And so I always tell my students, if there's ever something that you think I'm not dealing with, I probably am, but I might not do it directly. So, you know, and I tell them about this situation because the kid was exhausted. And then we found, you know, it's like, okay, now that we understand what's going on, we found a place where he could, you know, lay down for a while and be more functional in school later in the day. But, you know, it's hard. You can't address it right there in class, you know. So sometimes you have to just let it go and then revisit it when, you know, when no one's around, so.
But what a great lesson for the other kiddos too, to understand that we all have differences and we all have our own individual needs. And let's address it, you know, let's let our friends take care of the needs that they have. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Good.
Sometimes I think two kids just need to talk about stuff and like hear from parents or others that, hey, this is normal, I went through that too, and it's okay. It's not
just you.
It's not just you. So they know, oh, okay, I'm not alone, and you know, it's that helps them to understand too, just being able to talk about it.
There's a book for high school students. Some of you may have heard of the It Gets Better project. I know the author's name is escaping me. Who is he, guys? Someone knows it. John Kreis? What is his name? I can't remember. But It Gets Better. It's a really great book, and I've lent it out to lots of our students to know. It's entries from different well-known people that talk about their experiences, not necessarily even mental illness experiences, but just battles, struggles that they dealt with as a youth, and it gets better. So,
I think some of the things we're mentioning are not, it's not a disorder we're
Yep.
talking about, it's a situation.
It's a struggle. Yep. Yep. All right, let's touch on phobias. A specific phobia. One of them that I think we see in schools a lot, and I guess I can't say that I don't think I've ever actually seen it diagnosed for one of our students, but agoraphobia, a phobia of open spaces and crowded places. Like I said, I don't think I've seen it diagnosed, but I see it every day. Students who have a lot of trouble during passing time, those halls are crowded, you know, so expecting them to go out into a hall with 1,600 other students, it can be too much for a kid. So, you know, giving them a pass to leave class a little bit earlier, arrive to class a little bit late, just to, you know, kind of work through some of that stuff, working up to, okay, I'm gonna be in the hallway for 1 minute. Next week I'll be in the hall for 2 minutes, and so on. So, there's a difference between fear and phobia. Obviously, phobia is much more intense, and it has to be persistent for a period of time. But these are just some common fears in children. Many of us have phobias. If they interfere with life and our daily functioning, that is when it becomes a problem. You know, John Madden, some of us, his phobia might interfere with our everyday life. For John Madden, he can purchase an RV and have a driver to drive him across the country to maintain his job. My phobia is, to this day, I've been here 10 years, to this day when I walk down that hallway right there, I walk on the left side so I can avoid the snake. Now, I'm an adult, so I know it's irrational that that snake is there and it can't get out of the glass, it can't harm me, and if it would get out of the glass, it's still not going to harm me. It's probably going to do whatever it does to get away from me. I can't do it. I can't go near the snake, I refuse to look at it, and it's irrational, but it is what it is.
How do you tell? I struggle. I have 2 girls in my foods class who refuse to get up and present. And the one stood with her paper in front of her face, which looked even worse, like this, while she was up there with a group of 4 people. It's like, and she was completely beet red behind that piece of paper. And it's like, to me, that is a true phobia of not being able to get up in front of a group. But a lot of kids use it as an excuse to not present. So that was the worst I've ever seen. But I have, you know.
And sometimes we might have to make modifications for that they can present, you know, one-on-one, present to a camera, and try to work up to that. But Glenn, do you have any insight to that too? Because I bet you deal with that all the time as well. Well, I'm sorry, what school are you at?
I'm at Robbinsdale Armstrong High School.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot of things in speech and theater and accommodating. Well, most people, when they're in the theater class, they know what they're getting into, but we have a lot of public speaking fear. And actually, more people are afraid of public speaking than they are of flying. It's like the most, it's the biggest fear people have. So we do accommodate in ways like allowing them to present after school just with the teacher, allowing them to present on camera. Sometimes that's a fear too. So, but really trying to make it the most. We need to see the skill, you know, but we can't. To force them to do it in front of a class is something we try and be really aware of it. Like you said, sometimes you don't know if they're trying to get out of it or. But most of the time, when a child is definitely afraid of speaking, they really are definitely afraid of speaking in front of a group.
So forcing them to do it straight out the gate.
Or you can
that is a high
or you know, if it's a group presentation, that person did something else in the presentation. They had a different element that wasn't speaking in front of the group, unless it's really hard to frame.
Sure.
Just a quick question. With responsive classroom being such a relatively new thing, has there been any research with using that at elementary levels and then how it affects public speaking in the high school and adult life? You know, because responsive classroom, you share once, twice a week in front of a safe place, you're with your friends, you're in a group classroom. And then I feel like, I mean, I don't know, but I feel like that would help at some point, you know, like when I was younger, we didn't have that. You spoke out, turn, you got in trouble. But being able to present in front of people, I don't know. Like, has there been anything?
That's a great question, and you know, probably it's too early still to even have data to show us that. But that's an interesting point. That'll be interesting, you know, in the next several years to see what does that look like when students are asked to present in a group, since they've been doing it since they were wee.
I just have one comment about the performance anxiety as related in the music field as in other performing arts. You're taught very early on, or you come to realize that actually the added adrenaline can help you. And if you can get young people interested in, well, how can I then make this help me do better, perform better when I have to present? It's usually a positive for performers if it's in control. You know, you're shaking like a leaf, or you can't even talk because your mouth is so dry. That's probably not good. But the added adrenaline can be helpful in these situations, and you want it.
So I think that's when it's different between a healthy anxiety and something like this.
I think with one of the teachers at our school, we teach at a Arts Magnet High School, and one of our science teachers, whenever she has students present and they feel like they didn't do a very good job, she calls that like a rough draft presentation. So then they can have a do-over and, you know, get positive critique and then be able to present again and then feel more confident about their presentation.
I like that. Good idea. Intervention, strategy, write it down.
I'll just say, I think we should be really careful about judging whether a kid is telling the truth or not telling the truth about something, because we always think of things from our own perspective, and I can tell you from my own daughter's experience, you know, she says it's like walking around with a car alarm inside her, and she doesn't know when it's going to go off. And it's real, it's very, very real for her, and trying to give strategies and things. So for me, as a teacher and having somebody stand up and present, I think, what is the worst thing if I say, okay, you don't have to, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I say you can present this to me outside of class, or you can show me in a different way that you understand how to do this? What's the worst thing that can happen? Even if they are doing it just to get out of it, what's the worst thing? I've erred on the side of caution. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think when a child says, I don't feel, I'm very, very anxious about this, I think you kind of have to take that at face value.
Yeah, because it can go back to that graphic that I showed earlier with the brain. You know, we can't. Who are we to say, get over it, move on, suck it up, walk up?
One thing I do is I work with the students and help them realize that they have to do a presentation right, to do it at the beginning, be one of the first students, because the longer you sit there, the more anxious you become, and so, and if you do it first, it's better. And another thing is when students have severe anxiety, I work with the teacher and see if they can do a PowerPoint presentation with all the information.
Thank you, Linda. Have you guys heard of Royce White? He's a Minnesota boy, basketball player. He played for the U of M for a while. Eventually he ended up with the Houston Rockets. Royce White has a severe fear of flying, diagnosable phobia, fear of flying, which actually ended his career with the Houston Rockets. So at first he tried to deal with it that he would just drive to the away games, but you can only drive across the country so far before he could not make it by game time. He missed some games. He ended up being disciplined for missing some basketball games, and like I said, it ended his career. So Anyway, just an example of someone with a diagnosable phobia. Let's talk about test anxiety. Have you guys seen that in class at all? Yeah. I would say this is something that we probably see most often in school. And again, I want to stress that it's not our job to diagnose. It's not our job to decide whether or not this is a true disorder or a true phobia. If a kid is, well, it's not our job to do that. But let's just look at an example. So this is a student who he's a great kid. He's very involved. He's a good student. His homework, he scores 90% and 88%, but then quizzes and tests, he's at 17% and 25%. Do you think he maybe has some issues with testing? I mean, this is a kid who's tried every strategy in the book to do well on tests. When given the opportunity to use note cards, that sucker is filled up margin to margin, and spends hours studying for tests. He can't do it. He sweats, he gets nervous, he avoids, he's physically ill, this is a kid who does have a diagnosis of anxiety and struggles with test anxiety. This is a student who was appropriately placed on a 504 to deal with that. And that is one of the things that we can do as educators is when we're recognizing things like this, give a referral for a 504, because you know what? It's better to evaluate them and find out that there isn't something else going on there than to just say, oh, they're not good at testing. We'd rather, always, we'd rather evaluate. Let's move on to mood disorder. How are you guys doing? Do you need a little stretch break? Okay, keep trucking along. Okay, feel free to get up and exit if you need to do that. Mood disorders. All right, we're going to start with depression. Depression does tend to run in families. A situational depression is common after a loss. I don't think there's any surprises there. I really like this little box. Yes, I have depression, and no, I cannot just get over it. So for a diagnosis of depression, the symptoms need to be present for at least 2 weeks. I would say it goes on much, much longer before it's even recognized as a possibility of being depression. Some signs. Sometimes students will manifest their depression as anger. That one is really hard to really identify as depression or even to diagnose as depression, because sometimes we might just think they're a naughty kid, but really that's their way of manifesting. It's their natural reaction to what they're dealing with. I'd like you to take out your article that you read for this presentation. All right, please, if you would, find 3 people who are close to you. I'd like you to talk about the article and focus on the last part of that article about what can you do, what are some interventions that you can do, what are some specific things that you as an educator have tried in working with students who are dealing with depression. Write down your thoughts, and we're going to have a quick group share after that. Ignore that bottom line, we're extending that for today. So go ahead and take 5 to 7 minutes to do that. Make sure you're discussing with your group and then be prepared to share. Yeah.
How do we special class?
So on top of that, for hair,
For the first one I did, yeah.